comes the sun, doo-doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's all right.
Hello, Fortitude audience. And again, welcome to Season 2. We are super excited to be kicking off Season 2 with a couple episodes already in the queue, right? They're already...
That's right.
Yeah.
Season 2.
Sitting here with my amazing husband, Amos. Thanks for being here again, Amos, and showing up.
I'm happy to be here.
And today in our studio, we have Greg Sands, and we are so pumped to hear Greg today. So, Greg, thank you for joining us and just your willingness to share your story today.
You're very welcome.
So, Greg, are you originally from Sioux Falls? I don't think we've...
No, I went to Aberdeen when I was about 15 from Minneapolis, and then my parents were up in my mother, not my father. I never met my father, but my mother was up in Aberdeen, so I stayed with her until I was about 17. And then as a drywaller, I just traveled around the country for the next 12 or 13 years working.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So your beginning career started being a drywaller.
In Rapid City, yep.
And then you are the owner of one of the largest. So tell me, how did you stay in that world, or what gave you the drive?
I think the misconception today about tradesmen is when I was a young man, a tradesman or a truck driver was looked upon with reverence and pride. And then it shifted over the last 20 or 30 years to where people would look down their nose at a truck driver or a construction worker. Then maybe in the last 5 years now, it's kind of swinging back because we're seeing, people that work for us, they're living in new houses with new trucks and new boats, and they're doing really well. And it's a great job because as a tradesman, you can get work anywhere, and that's what I did. And I've been blessed to be surrounded by so many great people. Today, our company is 100% employee-owned ESOP, which took me several years to get that done. But I'm very proud of that because of many reasons. One is all of my money is going to stay in Sioux Falls instead of selling to an M&A firm or a P&E firm where all the money would exit. All of my money is going to stay here. And all of my employees, 10 years from today, they're going to own 100% of the company. I'm going to own zero, and they didn't pay a penny for the company. And so that's going to make some of them very, very comfortable in their retirement. And me and my wife feel ecstatic about that. And, I own several different businesses, but the baby is Sands Wall Systems.
Yeah.
And my wife and I, worked extremely hard to get that going.
When you say wife and I, so let's talk a little bit about who Greg is, because your legacy, it is amazing. I've known of you. I've heard of you for over a decade. I moved here in 2009, and it was within 3 years that I started to hear of this Greg Sands guy. Not your story that we're going to talk about today, but just your legacy in our community is beautiful, and it's bright. And what you have done and who you continue to be and show everyone around you it's a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
So if I can just toot your horn a little bit, because I know you're a very humble guy. But for our audience who has never met you, they don't know you. Who are you, Greg?
Well, it's hard to explain that without sounding
you can
a little pompous, but I'm a guy who grew up with an extremely loving mother. And when I was a year old, my father abandoned us. She moved to Rapid City. There's 2 kids, my brother and myself. And then she was in Rapid for a second after Fargo. I was born in Fargo. Then she moved to Minneapolis, south side of Minneapolis. It was in a dysfunctional relationship. She got out of that relationship, and then her father, my grandfather from Britain, South Dakota, moved her to Aberdeen, South Dakota when I was 14 or 15. And because of the dysfunctional relationship, that created pain in my life from the violent beatings and stuff like that. And my mother was trying to protect us, and then she would get beaten. So, all of us are dealt this different hand in life. And that was the hand that I was dealt. And when she got away from him and Grandpa got us over to Britain, things got better. My whole life, my mother worked 2 or 3 jobs a week to put food and clothing for us. I never went a day in my life hungry. I never went a day in my life without clean clothes. When I was a young man in Minneapolis, I wouldn't see my mother a lot. And it was me and my brother who were both incorrigible. And because she was working to feed us, and then in Minneapolis, at that young age, and there's gangs, and we lived on the south side of Minneapolis, and then you're in pain, so you turn to drugs. And so I started using drugs in my teens. And when I left Minneapolis and came to Aberdeen, South Dakota, I was ahead of my class, because I was a good student. I was bored, but I was good, particularly in math. And so when I got over here, I only went to high school for a couple of weeks, and I tested out. And so then I immediately went to work, and I left Aberdeen, moved to Rapid City. My friend got me a job as a drywaller, taught me the trade. Then I left Rapid City and went to Denver. My addictions just kept getting worse and worse. And I lived in Breckenridge and Winter Park in Denver, and was skiing and doing construction and drinking and drugging. And then in the mid 80s, moved to Los Angeles I thought that that's where my life would change, the Golden State. And the addiction just progressed. They came out with crack cocaine, which is the most addictive substance on the planet. And I got addicted to it. Spent 2 or 3 years down on Skid Row in LA. And I wasn't living in a cardboard box, but I was looking at them. And I was there every day, and, at 3 o'clock in the morning. And one night I pull in there to get some cocaine, and a Colombian guy comes up to me and asks what I want. And I say $40 worth, and he takes off. And then another black guy came up to me and said, "What do you want?" And I said $40 worth. And he goes, "I got it right here." So I bought it from him. Then the Colombian guy came back and started, and immediately reached through my window of my car, put my car in park. At the same time, there was another guy coming in the right side of my car, reaching into all my pockets, and they were searching the whole car. And I was just frozen, and this guy was poking me in the chest with his knife, saying, he wanted his $40. And then this really big guy off to my left screamed, "What the hell's going on here?" He was apparently in charge of everything. And he came over. I told him what had happened. He said, "You're an idiot. You don't tell this guy to go get it and then buy it from this other guy. So what you're going to do is you're going to give this guy some for free. This guy's going to leave, and this guy's going to give you your keys back for your car," because they took the keys for the car. So you're stranded in Skid Row at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you're the hostage.
Oh no!
And so I got out of that.
So scared, Greg? Were you in a point where that you're just numb and it was like whatever, or were you fearful?
I was back there the next day buying more.
Okay.
Yeah. Because even the times I've overdosed, just hitting the ground from an overdose and waking up and seeing the scrapes on my face from hitting the ground so hard. And then the first thing you do is more drugs, because you're powerless over your addiction at that point. Your choice to use has been taken away from you years and years ago. And, some people get sentenced to prison I got saved when I went to prison. And I didn't know it at first because everything in my life was somebody else's fault. It was someone else's fault. I was in prison. I'm entitled to this. Addicts, some reason, have this sense of entitlement and expectations on others, which is where I was at then. And then I had a moment of clarity when I was in federal prison.
What year did you go to prison?
89.
Okay.
Did 2 years and got out in 91.
So you were in the LA in the 80s, and then from there straight to prison in California?
So I was in California, left California 87, came back to live with my mother, was there 2 years in Aberdeen, from 87 to 89, got arrested in 89, sentenced to 10 years, won my case on appeal, got resentenced to 30 months, and then, which a 30-month sentence is 24 because you get about 6 months good time. And then I when I left federal prison, I came to sue. I had a choice between Aberdeen County Jail or the Glory House halfway house, where I had came to the Glory House when I was in court and under, I don't know, surveillance is the right word. They're doing a pre-sentence investigation. So you're under investigation. I guess surveillance would be accurate.
Do you share what you went to prison for?
Yeah. I went to prison for conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute 173 grams of cocaine. Today, if I was arrested for that, I don't know what would happen. I'm glad I don't have to worry about it. But back then, in 1987, the Senate and Congress were trying to change all the laws and put out these extremely harsh penalties for drug. It was I can give more time than you. I can give more time than you. And that's how politicians were getting elected. It was part of the thing, I think. But we didn't know what we were doing, so they felt more time. And then they, like crack cocaine, for instance, in the federal guidelines, when I got sentenced, crack was 100 to 1. So 100 grams of powder that cost, we'll just say, $7,000, or 1 gram of crack, which cost $80, same sentence in prison.
Wow.
And it was targeted, to the communities that were heavily involved in the crack, which were our minority communities around the nation. And then it was 100 to 1. And then when Obama got in, he changed it to 18 to 1. So still today, if you get arrested with $100 of crack or $100 of powdered cocaine, the federal sentencing guidelines is 18 times as harsh for crack as it is for powdered.
Okay.
And
wow, I'd have no idea.
Yeah. And
do you have an opinion on that? Is that
I believe that there needs to be a real spread because I think you could snort coke a couple times and not have it ruin your life.
Yeah.
I think if you smoke crack a couple of times, you're going to end up in a cardboard box.
Yeah.
It's really addictive.
Yeah, I've heard that. So prison, you go into prison. What was that moment like for you when you're like, did that feel like the lowest of low moment when you got, okay.
So there's a great story that we have to wrap out on the end of about the BOP plane. Okay.
Okay.
I'll tell you one side of it now. So Con Air is the Bureau of Prisons Transit 737 or whatever it is. And you go in there and changed in shackles. And I was in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. It was cold. They take you out of the van and they line you up out on the tarmac. You're surrounded by U.S. Marshals with shotguns. They search you again and you're freezing because you're in a T-shirt. And if it's 30 below zero, you're in a T-shirt. And it wasn't, but it was cold. It was very cold. And you get searched, you go onto the plane. The plane flies all over the United States. And at the end of the day, it stops in El Reno, Oklahoma, which is the distribution network for the Bureau of Prisons. So my first night in prison was in El Reno, Oklahoma. It's just like you see on TV, 4 or 5 tiers of steel bars and screaming 24/7. At the nighttime, it's constant screams of terror and hollering and guys communicating with each other. And my first couple days there in that cell block, the cells were all full. And what they call the people that first get into prison, they call them transits, because you're in transit, you don't have any money, you don't have any commissary, you don't have any clothing. You have what's on your back, and that's it. And so when you first get there, you're on a cot outside of the cells, and they had the cots about 8 inches from each other going all the way around this cell block. So there was about 200 cots and for those 200 of us that were on cots, there's one bathroom that we share, a cell that they leave open. And that's where that night, my first night in prison, I still remember it vividly. I was laying on a bunk and I looked up and there was windows up there, and there was some windows that were, the little 9x16 window or whatever size it is, broken out, and it was snowing, and the snow was coming through and trickling down onto where we were sleeping. And I was scared to death, and I was crying and, to myself.
Yeah.
And because can't do it in public or you'll get beaten down. And
yeah.
It was just an extremely violent environment.
Oh,
Yeah.
The screaming, my whole body, there's the goosebumps of exactly what you see. People wonder all the time, is it the same? Is it the same what you see in the movies? Because a lot isn't, right?
A lot isn't, but that was.
Okay.
And I mean, that's the place where they put Timothy McVeigh. That's a really bad prison, and it's a transit facility. So you could be there 3 days or 3 months. And, I got lucky because when I went there, I met a guy from South Dakota who would get me cigarettes and ice cream from commissary, and then my mom would send them to him when I left, because otherwise you're just stranded with nothing.
So you before prison, I think through the process, because when we're doing prison ministry, Greg, with Pastor Al Peratt, who's also on our podcast. We're in prison and we're meeting some of the neatest guys, the neatest people, and who have life. And it was one night that they don't remember, and they woke up next to a dead body, and now they have life in prison, and their whole world has changed. And you think about the moments that you are leading up to, because there's no difference in me and the people behind bars either. I just didn't get caught from drinking and driving, or I didn't hurt someone, Thank you, Lord, for the guardian angels that were constantly hovering,
Yeah.
But there's a moment, right, where you're like, this could be the end. This could be the end. You went through being stabbed, which I would love for you to talk about that a little bit. But like being in prison, it's like the addiction pulls you so far in that you get to the point where it's possibly the end, and yet we still continue it.
Still continue to use.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when I finally stopped, I was about 3 months from my release date, because I used throughout my whole incarceration. And when I finally stopped, it was because in the federal system, if you get a dirty UA, you get an automatic 9 months extra onto your sentence. And I was 90 days from walking out, and I didn't want that to happen.
So then you were able to stop.
I was able to stop for 90 days. Then my plan when I got out, I was in Fort Worth, Texas. They take a shuttle from the prison to the airport, and then I was going to go into the bar, have a couple of drinks. And by the time I flew up to the Glory House and they breath tested me, I would blow clean. I knew that from when I was on work release up in Aberdeen, because I would drink in the morning, blow at 5 o'clock at night, and blow clean. And because, the addict will manipulate every situation they can to find ways and means to get more.
Yeah.
And but the getting clean in prison for that 3 months was really good. And then I got on the shuttle, went to the airport, went straight to the bar, and through God's grace and a divine intervention, ordered a Diet Coke, and flew to the glory house, and I was on fire. I already had planned that I was going to get off paper 2.5 years early, that I was going to get a presidential pardon as soon as possible. And I had made plans for all these things while I was still incarcerated. And then all those things happened. I got off paper 2.5 years early. I got the presidential pardon in 2001 from Clinton. And that was a great day when that happened. That was beautiful.
Yeah. I've heard it's Pastor Al with Obama, how Pastor Al got a pardon from him.
Yeah. Al's my good friend.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about you a lot.
Yeah.
So you get out of prison, and were you done? Do you done drinking, done drugs after you got out of prison?
Yeah.
Like done?
Well, I went social drinking for 1 day, and then was in a blackout within about 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then that was then since then I've been in active recovery for 33 years. Yeah.
Amazing. You lived it all the way to Skid Row. I mean, that's the addiction, the drinking, the gambling, the smoking, there's a lot of people who, when I speak, will say, I have no idea what that would be like. Because the way our brains are wired differently. Like we learned when I was in treatment, how you could hook a normal person up and you could hook a person with addiction up. Exact same line drip of alcohol or whatever it is. And our brains, yours and mine, light up so different compared to the normal person. And just the wiring, the neuroscience behind it it's fascinating to me. So the way that we continue this downward spiral, regardless of the outcome, how pulled we are. To cut it off, people don't get that. They're like, how can you just go from that to then just being done? So what do you believe it was redemption from God, or do you believe it was like you were scared into it? To like, I ain't ever going back to prison.
No, I think fear is healthy. I'll start with that. I had a moment of clarity when I was incarcerated that I was involved. The reason I was in prison was my fault, and period, and that I was an addict. And after having that moment of clarity, probably 12 or 15 months into my 24-month stint, I was looking back at my life, and the wreckage of my past was a big, big pile. And so that was sobering. But also what happened, the miracle was I'm 3 months from getting out, and I've stopped using any substances. And my brain starts functioning at a much higher level than when you're doing crack and alcohol, right? Mm-hmm. Your brain works better without the crack.
Amazing.
Yeah. So anyways, I come to Sioux Falls. I go to the Glory House. They make me get a job at the Shoppers News for $5.25 an hour, folding newspapers for minimum wage. And how the statement went was, you start tomorrow at 2:00 or you go back to prison. And that's how it was there 30-some years ago. And there wasn't a lot of jobs. And it was nice of the guy from the Shoppers News to hire us. It really was. And I met a guy there. He was folding the newspapers across the thing from me. I figured he'd go back to prison. He did. And down the street, there was a guy hired. There was a drywall project down the street. So I walked down there, applied, got hired, and worked for him for 3 months. And I was underpaid. So I went and got a better job. And then at that better job, where I was making journeyman scale at the time, like I should, I met a guy, and we partnered up for about 3 years, 3 or 4, probably 4. And then we split off, and it was a great separation, because I had all my own tools. He had all his own. We were just splitting checks. There wasn't any corporation or anything. I just had a different vision than he did. And then I started Sands Wall Systems as we know it today. And I'd say, the addiction was always there. And But because of God's grace and the miracle of recovery and my own hard work and having a rock star for a partner in my wife, we were just killing it. And for us, we really were. And then my mom was dying. And so she's up in Aberdeen. We're going back and forth. They'd call me on Thursday and say she's not going to make it through the weekend. Up there, we'd zip. It was the first time in my life I could ever buy a new vehicle. I had bought a new vehicle. So I had good transportation to drive icy South Dakota roads in the wintertime at night, right? Because you're going up to see your mother is going to die. You're driving through anything to get there. Mm-hmm. And I checked in at Super 8, and I was walking into my room. It was room number 111. And as soon as I looked at the number, I knew that she was going to die. And that was about 11 o'clock at night. About 12 or 1 o'clock, we went into the ER, Pam and myself. And my mother popped up out of bed. She was in a coma and talked to us for about 15 minutes. She went back into a coma, and then she would die the next day. Or maybe 2 days later. Anyways, that was God's gift to us, was, Mom popping up and talking to us. Yeah. And then the last day I saw her alive, I looked at the clock. I was parking in the cul-de-sac, and it was 11:11. I ran in to see her and visited her, and then that was the last time I saw her alive. Then I buried her. Then she died like on Thursday. And Friday, I was supposed to go to Chicago to a Narcotics Anonymous convention. And, I didn't have any money. My sponsor had told me, save $10 a week, Greg, and you can go to that thing for $600 or something. And I saved, and I had money, and I had a plane ticket. And Pam said, just go ahead and go. And I fly to Chicago. There's 20,000 people there from NA. I know one guy from Sioux Falls, and I find him within 2 minutes. He carries me throughout the whole weekend. I reconnect with an old friend of mine who's been in recovery for, 15 years by then, and one of my old hardcore using buddies. And then I come back from Chicago. I bury my mother at 1111 South Main. Mm. So now I start seeing this correlation with the number 11 in my life. And the package was sent to 1100 blah, blah, blah. Well, the last zero had a little tail on it that made it look like a 6. And so an 1/8 inch of ink set this whole thing into motion, because it went to 1106 is where the guy delivered it to instead of 1100, the package. Oh. And so all this started over that little...
What was the package?
Cocaine. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So this was, and that's what sent you to prison.
That's what I went to prison for. Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. And then, my mother, the greatest gift I've been given is that I was clean when my mom died. That was really a big one.
Right. I was going to go back to that about your mother, because as you were going through all of that, and she's single mom doing the best, and it sounds like she was doing really well. Like she was doing everything she could to provide, and then she started to see you as her son slipping into a direction that she probably really hoped and prayed you wouldn't go.
Yeah.
But I can tell that you really love your mom. Like your mom sounds amazing. And
Thank you.
In those moments did you feel like did you just do a really good job at hiding it, or did she know? And did you feel the disappointment, or what was her response to you as you were slipping into that?
I'd say, because I was gone, I would just come home for Christmas. I was in California or wherever, right before the arrest, of course, I was in California. I would come home every year for Christmas. And then one year I missed. And the year I missed, she had a nervous breakdown, which I regret to this day that I didn't make it that year. But, I did as good as I could with the, fighting the disease I had. And, back then everyone thought it was a moral deficiency, not a disease. And, I would come home for Christmas and buy her a nice Black Hills gold brooch or something. And I was making pretty good money, out in LA, I was, I would go to work for a company, and in a matter of weeks, I would be one of their top guys, and totally in over my head, but very comfortable there. Mm-hmm. And so my mother, she accepted what was happening to me. It was certainly shame for me. And she kept sending me money when I was in prison. She sent me $90 a month to live on. Mm. And when I got out, my grandmother borrowed me $2,500 to buy a car that I bought for $1,500. And then I spent about $400 on tools, hand tools and stuff, and $300 or $400 on clothing. And I had a couple $100 left, and that's what I started with.
Man.
And then the Federal Bureau of Prisons gave me my $50 start over money too.
Thank you, Jesus, for the cheeseburger.
$50.
Oh man. And sorry, did you have something?
I just wanted to clarify what started this whole thing, which was that package. I mean, to prison. Was that package meant for you, or was it mistakenly? It was meant for you. Went to the wrong house.
Went to the wrong house. Got sent back to California.
So someone opened it and went.
Yeah, the FBI opened it in California.
Where's this coming from? Where was it supposed to go to?
Yeah.
Then that's how that happened.
So then the package goes back to California. The FBI then opens it, reships it, re-notifies me that it's there. And my friend went out to pick it up, and it was the FBI agents dressed up as FedEx agents, and they arrest him.
Yeah.
And I told him, if you get arrested, you can turn me in. Uh-huh. And he did. And I, it's a mess.
Oh, yeah. I saw you just go back there.
Yeah.
You just went back to the place because you knew it was coming. And when you know it's coming, you're looking for it. And when you knew it didn't show up on time, did you start to worry?
Well, actually, when he went out to pick it up, I drove a couple miles behind him, went past the facility, did a U-turn, and came back. And when I was coming back, the FBI had him on the ground.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So then I knew, and then I just left town, called my attorney, who was a good guy. And then my attorney called him at like 5 o'clock that night and said, Greg, they're looking. He called them and me and said, they want you to turn yourself in. I'll walk in with you tomorrow, and we'll bond out tomorrow, and you won't have to go into jail. And so he did that for me. But it was just a delay.
Yeah.
The inevitable.
What, you had a plan for when you got out to go to the bar and get a drink, And
I'd been obsessing on that every night for months.
You said through divine intervention that you ordered a Diet Coke.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, I had been making poor decisions most of my life. I've been gifted with some skill sets that not everybody has. And God just had other plans for me, because I had been thinking about that drink every night for several months. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I could have it and not get caught. And then it was just through divine intervention that I walked up and ordered the Diet Coke. And, there's been multiple times in my life that through divine intervention, I've been saved. Mm-hmm. Car accidents, overdoses, many, many times. Many times over the last 30 years since I've gotten clean.
When did that decision change along that path? When you got out, did it change when you walked into the bar? Did it change before you got to the bar?
No, it changed at the bar.
Right, as the words were coming out of your mouth?
As the words were coming out of my mouth.
What a blessing.
Yeah, that was a gift.
Just right then and there, God said, no, this is what you're going to say. What do you attribute to that? Was that, did you have a relationship with Christ at that time?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I've always had a relationship with God, and I've always loved God. At times my faith has lacked, and I have no confusion. The reason that I am not incarcerated, dead, or living under a bridge is because of God's grace and the miracle of recovery and my own hard work. I've worked really hard. My wife has worked really hard. I quit going to organized 12-step meetings about 16, 17 years ago. But without a doubt, the 12-step fellowship saved my life. And I believe that they're a great avenue for hundreds of thousands of people to seek help. And they're proven that they work because it worked for me. Mm-hmm. And I was the guy that they all said would never make it. You're coming back. That's what my friends said. The guys I was incarcerated with, my probation officers. Mm-hmm. Nobody really thought maybe my new probation officers probably thought I could make it. But, and I made it.
Yeah, you did. What, one of the things that I learned through Heather's addiction before she was in recovery, that I thought she could just stop. That was my thing, because I could stop at things, and I've got a good amount of self-control. And so I was frustrated when she wouldn't stop. Just stop. Yeah. You're wrecking your life. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Discipline.
What can you say to the person who's in that same scenario, that they think that their loved one who's causing all this pain can just stop?
Well, I think a good analogy is if that person that is confused about how can you just stop, or why can't you just stop? The reality is the addict's power over that substance, if it's alcohol, drugs, coke, it doesn't matter. It's all it's the same minutia, but their choice to use has been gone when they're in full-blown wrath of addiction. Their choice to use is gone. It's the obsession and compulsion have taken over. I believe addiction is a three-pronged stool. It's caused by the hereditary gene that's passed from father to son. It's caused by an environmental breakdown. You're in a dysfunctional, hostile, toxic environment or whatever. And then it's also accompanied with a spiritual breakdown. There's some sort of spiritual breakdown. And so what I'm doing through the Mayo Clinic and through Stanford Research is working on the genomics of addiction, which is a program that, in essence, in layman's terms, to knock it down to a level where Greg could understand it, it's basically going in, taking out the gene of an addict, mutating it, putting it back in, and curing that piece of addiction, that physiological piece. And I believe it'll happen in my lifetime.
Wow.
And so then now, if you can get rid of that part of it, that's a big part of it, that the obsessive compulsive part of it, that addictive, that's what's bred into us. And if you can get rid of that, and then you're just working on the environment and the spiritual.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, I don't care where you go. If you go to AA, NA, church, all three, any combination of the two, whatever works for you. If it's working for you, that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And I really try not to judge others for their programs.
Building community in your sobriety is, I think, the hugest key to just having people surround you that know you, understand you, that you can be fully, fully honest with, and you can dig into the nitty gritty. Because where we get the most hung up, and what I'm hearing is it's here we are, and we're the person with the addiction, and we feel shame, we feel alone, we feel all these things. And so we go there, we go to alone, we go into the shame and the mental space, and we're in it all the time. And so we don't want to be around people because we don't want them to notice or get any clue. But when we're out with people and we're able to be open, there's a freedom. I feel like the shackles come off when you can just be open and honest with I have like my top 12, or top 10 people that I'm like, you are my ride or die. You're my person that I am going to call if I am in that moment. Cause I don't have a sponsor and didn't do the 12 step. And people will ask me, I did it when I was in treatment up until 5, the 5th step, but I've never done the full. And people are like, how do you go to AA? Do you do this? I'm like, I surround myself with people that will hold my feet to the fire and talk about it openly, stand on stages and openly talk about it. I can't walk into a local grocery store and walk out with anything without someone probably going, hey, whoa, Heather, like, cause I just am so open about it. So there's a lot of moments that we all recover differently, but I think having that solid couple core people in your life is really important.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always had them.
So Pam, you guys met obviously outside of.
No, Pam and I met at AA.
Okay.
That first year when you're not supposed to have any relationships.
Yeah, that's a big no-no.
Yeah.
So she's never seen you drunk?
No.
Like she's only seen Greg sober?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of cool. I mean, it was after. Thank you, Pam, for.
But we both relapsed. We met each other at AA, and then she continued to drink for a little bit, and then I relapsed. And then right after I relapsed, I was meeting my sponsor at Jermel's, where she worked down there on Minnesota.
Oh, here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Okay.
And I went in and asked her for a extra thick milkshake that annoyed her. and I left. I was telling my sponsor about my relapse. And what's one important thing about the question my sponsor asked me, why did you drink, Greg? And I said, because I wanted to. Yeah. And he said, I'm so glad to hear that. Instead of all these other BS excuses I've heard of why it's because you wanted to. And that's what it was. And anyways, Pam and I met there, and then we're kind of bouncing around a little bit from fellowship to fellowship, and then we kind of locked in with Narcotics Anonymous, and it's a wonderful group. It saved my life through God's grace, a miracle of recovery, and my own hard work. I showed up. I show up to everything. I never miss a meeting.
Yeah,
Very rarely do I miss a meeting. If I miss a meeting, it's because it's not on my calendar.
Yeah, we just talked about that.
Yeah.
I will show up, and I'll show up early usually, but you got to make sure it's on my calendar for me to show up. Yeah. So, Greg, our time it's crazy how fast it goes. As we end with this and your story, because this is a beautiful story of redemption, because not only is it a story of recovery, redemption, hard work, all the things that you've put in, the lives you've touched. I mean, you started your own drywall company, and is it nationally or is it global? You have a few different things.
We're the last year top line revenue. We are the 33rd largest in America.
Okay.
In the industry?
Yeah.
Which there's a lot, because every building needs drywall.
Well, no,
right?
It's the steel studs.
Oh,
it's the steel studs, and we now have a factory where we manufacture our own steel studs. So we are, to a certain degree, our own supply
wall
chain.
Systems. Yes.
Sans wall systems. And so having that factory was a total game changer. And it also, it's positioning that company for such success as I exit the company. We have a new factory where we were some of the first guys in the nation that were rolling their own studs. And our customers noticed that. And they say, we want you to do this job for us. Yeah. Not anyone else. We just want you guys here. But we have to be competitive. We have to be, if they negotiate a job to our company, with that comes a very high expectation. And we have to hit those marks. And we do every time.
Mm-hmm. Are you talking of deadlines, time deadlines, of quality of workmanship?
Yeah. Deadlines and the quality has to be there. And we try to beat the deadlines, and get them. If we can get them in 30 days earlier than our competitor could, that's real money to those guys. Mm-hmm. If they can open that building 1 month earlier, and we had something to do with that, on a big $30 million building that we're doing, their rent for 1 month is a big number.
Yeah.
And we're getting them in a month earlier. And so there's some value in that. And practicing these principles in all of our affairs is something that I learned from being in recovery that I carried over into my business. And we just have the golden rule that we treat people like we want to be treated, and we're honest. There's people that send us 2 checks for the same job, and we send them back, of course.
Yeah.
But they call us and well, thank you so much. You're going to do my work for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. Honesty. It's amazing.
Yeah. And all I had to do is have integrity.
Yeah.
All right. That's good.
Oh, man. Well, Greg, tell me, as we close up, you did mention that we can go a few minutes over here because you mentioned the BOP plane. So I wanted to get back to that. And then your wife, just can you share, you and Pam have been through a lot. You are here a little bit, you go down to California, you're living a legacy. Like when you look back on all of this and you share what you've gone through, and then you get that moment where you're sitting with your beautiful bride and you're thinking back on everything. What are just a couple of those moments when you look at Pam that you just go, man, I'm so grateful we did this as a couple? Because you say,
yeah, that was last night.
Oh.
We had that conversation, and we really grateful that we, of course, quit drinking and taking drugs. But after that, very grateful to have quit smoking and to have quit gambling and to have gotten healthier. And, she's the wind in my sail. And, I since getting inducted into the Hall of Fame, I went back and listened to some of my friends that got inducted and listened to their speeches. And every person says, I never would have been where I'm at in my life without my spouse.
Yeah.
Every person. And it's very true for me because Pam is a closer. She's very focused. She's just awesome. And I'm so blessed because one of the things that happens when I've had a lot of sunlight put on me. And so she's in the shadow and she says, no, I'm not in the shadow. I'm in the sunlight. And she is. And she is the sunlight itself at some times. And I don't, people. So I'll tell you a quick story. So I get inducted into this Hall of Fame. It's a big deal. And somewhere it hit some sort of national media. And I don't know, or somehow this guy on the East Coast hears about it, calls me up. He had been incarcerated with me. Oh. It's the only guy that I remember. And he calls me and we're talking. He congratulates me. He tells me a little bit about his life. And I'm just talking that I had went to this restaurant on the way home and had a really bad steak and it was tough. I was just sharing this story, this really famous restaurant I went to in Amarillo, Texas. And then I get this text the next day that he's upset that I was bragging about eating steak every night. And I'm like, dude, I wasn't. I'm just sharing with you what my life is. That one night I had steak and it was really good, and the next night it sucked. I wasn't bragging about that. I'm just sharing a little part of my journey. But what happens because of the success is people, they get blinded by the success I've had, because I haven't changed. I'm the same person with the same beliefs, with the same desires, and what Pam and I want to do is just be of service to God and others. And right now we're getting ready to take a year off because once, getting through that ESOP, those are punishing.
Yeah.
And it took 18 months. And then at the end, the last 5 months, it's a full court press and it's intense. And, I need time off for my mental health and my physical health. And I've started golfing now. That's been a wonderful gift for me. I picked it up during COVID, and because I never had time to learn how to golf when I was working.
Yeah,
because it takes so much time.
I'm trying to get Amos to. We're trying to golf a little bit more too because
it's a great hobby.
It is. Mm-hmm. It's a good time, good bonding time together.
A couple of things I want to say before we close. There's lots of opportunities in our community to lift up this sector of our population, the addicts, the incarcerated people. And we have to have a coalition. And I'm working on trying to put something together like that. And it's a ambitious plan statewide. And I have great friends that are willing to help with it. But we're in a beautiful community that supports the people in needs. You look around here, this is a beautiful community that we live in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of love here.
Yep, there sure is. In Sioux Falls, South Dakota, for those who are not from around here, it really is. And we hear it often, Greg. We hear a lot of people say, there's something in Sioux Falls. There's something different with what y'all got going on. And even just, South Dakota in general, it's really beautiful where we live. People care a lot about each other.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear more about that coalition you got going on as we continue to move forward in this. We're really focused on changing the stigma of it, coming from the side of someone who hasn't experienced what addiction really is like, and someone who has, and then how we come together as a family and husband and wife and help others through that. Because we get a lot of calls from a lot of couples that will say, how are you doing it? How'd you do it? And first and foremost is we can't do it with judgment, because we don't know what the other person is walking through. So thank you for hitting that piece of the world that needs a lot more direction and understanding, because the education piece is the best. Once we start educating people a little bit more, like, were you taught what, like, cause I wasn't taught growing up, and that's the thing that's it's like, I wasn't taught what an alcoholic, like, you might want to watch out for this. You might want to watch out for that. You might want to think about this differently. You might, No,
there was no education like that.
So I think that's where I get excited the most is the education piece on helping people understand what we're wired like, because it's unique.
So
but
just design an app that's kind of like playing a game that'll teach that to a kid on their phone, and we'll have something.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, Greg, thank you. Thank you, Pam, for borrowing Greg to us for a little bit today and just sharing both of your stories. And just you've done a lot of wonderful things, and you continue to. So in your year off, I'm excited to see what you have, your brain has come up with after, because I know that our brains don't really shut off. So taking a year off, it might be hard.
Might be.
But you guys will have so much time. So thank you for your time today, Greg.
You're very welcome. Thank you. It was nice meeting you both.
Thank you so much for listening. We want to change lives through this podcast. And if you want to support this podcast or our guests, please see the links below for our Patreon and giving links.
And like and subscribe, and also share our podcast as much as possible. Thank you.